news from CBS 2.
This is Eyewitness News with live breaking news.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Breaking news tonight, the extraordinary audio recording. President Trump on the phone pressuring Georgia officials to change the vote count.
It's 8:52 here in New York. I'm Bryant Gumbel. We understand that there has been a plane crash on the southern tip of Manhattan. You're looking at the World Trade Center. We understand that a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center. We don't know anything more than that.
This is breaking news from Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Breaking news from CBS 2.
What would getting a vaccine today mean to you?
Oh, everything. I'm compromised. And if I ever get through COVID, I'll probably die.
The news of this day is that Kenneth Starr, the independent counsel, is investigating allegations that you suborned perjury by encouraging a 24-year-old woman, former White House intern, to lie under oath in a civil deposition about her having had an affair with you. Mr. President, is that true?
That is not true.
Hi once again, everybody. I'm Ed Berliner. Welcome into the Press Corps. Real news, real reporters, real opinion. We base it all on facts. Let us begin as America finds itself in an era of disinformation, misinformation, propaganda, and flat-out lies. Depends on how you put it. Those who sit on one side wonder how the other side could basically fall for so many lies, so many times, and every single day. Those on the other side wonder why they're being lied to every single day, and wonder why anybody else can't see, as a matter of fact, that they're not the ones falling for lies. Others are the ones handing them lies. It's where we sit right now as a country has to wonder about where indeed to think about that misinformation and that disinformation. It all begins with the President of the United States. And let's be honest, politicians have been lying for a long, long time, and they will lie long after we are gone. But it is this set of lies that we focus on here today, those of the President, Donald Trump. Ed Lavandera from CNN recently went to Texas, where the President decided to make his stand and talked about his border wall and many other things. But Ed Lavandera asked a very serious and a very pointed question. What if those who follow the President of the United States, Donald Trump, suddenly found out they were the ones being lied to?
A self-described Trump train of supporters lined the streets where the president landed in the Rio Grande Valley. This is a crowd of true believers. Ryan Wolf says he's a stay-at-home father of 3 children. He brought a ballistic vest, a knife, and a baton to protect fellow Trump supporters.
Why is this necessary?
Well, sir, we have seen the Marxists attack children and families and women. I'm not going to tolerate that.
Wolf and others here don't blame Trump for last week's riot at the U.S. Capitol. The conspiracy theories are running rampant.
I believe that either foreign intelligence officers or local militant groups incited the conflict.
I feel it was people like Antifa, Black Lives Matter, who infiltrated the crowd that caused the problems.
Of course, none of that is true.
He's boarding Marine One! Woo! He's on his way! He's on his way!
Among the most ardent Trump supporters is the false yet unwavering belief that the 2020 presidential election was riddled with widespread fraud.
This was a stolen election. There'll be a price sooner or later.
Nobody's ever actually looked at the evidence, so there's definitely evidence towards that, just that nobody wants to look at it.
Joanne Danworth says she will never see Joe Biden as a legitimate president and still has hopes of seeing Trump remain in office.
I want my President Trump standing up there being inaugurated as an extended president of the United States.
In this crowd, though, we found Noel Cantu. He says he's a retired Border Patrol agent and a lifelong conservative. We ended our talk on a question that revealed the danger for Republicans lying about the 2020 election.
President Trump has said that the election was stolen from him over and over and over. What if in the end you've been lied to this entire time?
I would definitely be very upset, because if my party is going to lie to me, and this is what they're telling me, and I find out later that it was nothing but lies, I don't think that I will ever vote again.
It is interesting to hear him talk about lies, because quite frankly, that report was filled with lies. Let's check the facts. The decision and the idea that people have attacked women and children in line is simply not true. There's no evidence of that whatsoever. With regard to those saying foreign intelligence, Antifa, and Black Lives Matter were involved in the Washington, D.C. insurrection riots, again, there is no proof to that whatsoever, and we'll talk about that momentarily. But also, if you listen, there was a gentleman in there who said that the evidence has never been looked at. That in itself is also a lie. Time and over again, with regard to the 2020 election, the evidence has been looked at many times in many ways, including by the Supreme Court. So once again, we have the idea of lies and misinformation being fed to people, and now finally there seems to be a crack. Those who think that if indeed we are being lied to, then perhaps we have to think twice. Well, that thinking twice perhaps should have been going on for a very long time, because if you once again continue to check and verify the facts, you will find out a number of things that are being told America by the Trump administration simply are not true. KHOU Television in Houston, Texas, recently looked into the claims that Donald Trump makes about his border wall, the thing that he is most proud of. Again, there are factual inaccuracies, and in many ways, you could simply say there is indeed a long stretch of the truth.
The border wall was one of President Trump's biggest campaign promises. His administration says 452 miles of the wall system have been completed. But not all of that is new construction. Melissa Correa verifies.
U.S. Customs and Border Protection is tracking President Trump's border wall system. As of January 5th, CBP claims 452 miles have been completed. President Trump just celebrated that milestone.
The completion of the promised 450 miles of border wall, 450 miles. Nobody realizes how big that is.
Let's verify. Our source is CBP, which just sent us its latest border wall status report released last Friday. The U.S. has a total of 771 miles worth of border barriers from California to the tip of Texas. The Trump administration has constructed 453 miles worth of barriers. But here's the context. CBC reports a vast majority of the president's project, 373 miles, either replaced or updated existing barriers, and not all of them are walls. The Trump administration so far has only added 80 miles of protection in locations where barriers didn't previously exist. A look at this interactive CBP map confirms nearly 300 miles of the president's border wall, that portion in red, is under construction or pre-construction. And when it comes to Texas, this latest CBP chart lists the Lone Star State as having the most projects pending and the least completed. $15 billion pulled from the Treasury, Homeland Security, and the Department of Defense are paying for the project. Mexico hasn't paid a penny. So we can verify that the Trump administration has completed about 450 miles of border wall, but only with the context that not all of it was built from scratch. With Verify, I'm Melissa Correa.
The interesting word there is context, because that's indeed how much of the misinformation and disinformation, propaganda and lies are simply never seen in context. As you can see there, the president's claim about all the miles of wall that he has built, and this is not left, right, or independent, down the middle. These are the facts and these are the numbers. Simply stated, the facts tell us it's just not true. So we go back again to that thought that there are those who say, if our president is lying to us, then we perhaps are going to look at things just a little bit differently. Well, things are changing when it comes to the networks and the outlets that have backed President Trump for some time. On Fox News, Tucker Carlson had Brit Hume, a former network correspondent and now a special correspondent for Fox, as his guest on a recent show. I don't think that Tucker Carlson was quite prepared for some of the comments that Brit Hume made with regard to Donald Trump. Look closely, those of you watching on video, the reaction of Tucker Carlson, and then listen for the one word that Brit Hume mentions that basically sets everything on a different path for those who follow Fox and those who follow the President of the United States.
Trump is obviously at this point radioactive, not just among liberals and Democrats, where he's always been absolutely loathed, but now to a great extent among everyday Republicans. I don't think there's any doubt he retains his hardest of hardcore base. They will be with him forever, I'm sure. But I mean, the rest of the Republican Party, they're looking at this and they're saying, what we don't want is this guy hanging around in 2 or 4 years, in 2 years during the congressional elections, and worst of all, running for president again after that. Because he'll pull off a segment of the Republican vote, make it unavailable to ordinary Republicans, regular Republicans, and be a curse on them. So that's a hard sort of a political calculation they're making. And the other thing is they're furious with him. They believe in their bones that he cost them the 2 special elections in the state of Georgia, which they manifestly should not have lost. Both those candidates were ahead and didn't quite get enough to avoid a runoff, and then they lost in the runoff. A lot of Republicans stayed home, offended by Trump. That's the reasoning anyway. So that's the reason the Republicans are turning away from him. They think he's bad news politically.
I certainly understand why they're mad at him. A lot of people who voted for him are mad at him, for sure. But impeaching him is a separate question. If you want to make certain that a lot of your voters think that you're reading off of someone else's script, if you want to make Trump last even longer in the minds of the public, you would impeach him, wouldn't you? I mean, wouldn't it be better just to ignore it?
Look, those are the competing political calculations, Tucker. I mean, I don't really think that I think it'd be pretty hard to revive his fortunes politically at this time, even by being, what a lot of people would consider to be unfair. After all, let's keep in mind that the overriding purpose of the whole impeachment power written into the Constitution is to get out of office an offending president who has done something truly reprehensible. Somebody said the other day on Twitter that they, had this way and that way of doing it. I said, I got a plan. I get rid of him in 12 days. This was a few days ago. He's gone. He's finished. And, he was down at the border today, but he's almost invisible now. He's being chastised and he's a dead duck politically. So the purpose of it, I think, is, it's a bit of overkill at this stage. Now, you can make an argument that he committed an impeachable offense. I mean, all that stuff he said for weeks on end after the election, that he'd won it in a landslide and that it was all stolen from him, and that Mike Pence had the authority, which he most certainly did not, of reversing the result at the last minute last week. I mean, that was utter balderdash, and he fed it into the veins of his supporters. And one could make a pretty good case that that's part of what got them into a fever that led to last week's events.
Right. You just got to wonder if it's not just better to make the case again. No one ever wants to make the case. They just want to vote for impeachment. Hey, Brit Hume, it's great to see you tonight. I appreciate your perspective on that. Thank you very much.
The confused look and the fumbling of Tucker Carlson was really worth the price of admission. Quite frankly, he didn't know where to go because Brit Hume stated the facts. Brit Hume used to be part of the ABC television network, and he was charged with reporting the facts. Now, as a commentator, often because he is on Fox, he has gone over the edge sometimes, as many of the Fox commentators have. But in this case, he nailed the word, balderdash. And if you saw the reaction of Tucker Carlson's face, that will tell you everything. Even those who followed Donald Trump for a very long time are now realizing exactly what has happened. This is a president, and these are followers who have lied to them. Now, the question about whether or not he's gone and finished, that's something else that people are going to have to decide, because we still have to wait and see what happens when the president does indeed disappear from Washington, D.C., and when he is back on YouTube, social media, and when he again has his bullhorn that he can then take anywhere he wants at any time. But again, the fact is balderdash. A wonderful word. Perhaps we need to get that back into the American lexicon a little more. This brings us then back to Insurrection Day itself in Washington, D.C. Something I mentioned earlier. The claims that there were Black Lives Matter activists and that Antifa was part of it. It was not part of the Donald Trump followers. It were these people. It was these groups that got involved and basically turned things around and made it a violent day in Washington, D.C. We've heard the claims. Now it's time to verify them. WZDX in Huntsville, Alabama, courtesy of Jason Puckett, decided to look a little deeper into the claims about Antifa.
There are a lot of claims that the people who broke into the Capitol on Wednesday weren't Trump supporters, but were actually Antifa members. U.S. Representative Mo Brooks says the evidence is growing that Antifa, quote, orchestrated Capitol attack with clever mob control tactics. So let's break this claim down, starting with these images. This Antifa Comrades flyer is being shared a ton with claims it tells Antifa members to disguise themselves as Trump supporters. But a reverse image search shows that this image is more than 2 months old. It was originally shared on articles like this on Election Day, November 3rd. And as you can see, the image has the date, November 4th, clearly in the text. We're marking this false. Then there's this claim, a man in the hallway of the Capitol with a tattoo on his hand, which these posts say is the communist hammer and sickle. But a higher resolution image from Getty Photos shows it's clearly not the hammer and sickle. It's actually a logo from a video game. This claim is false. Then there are tons of claims about this shirtless man wearing a horned hat. Quote, this is not a Trump supporter. This is a staged Antifa attack. Well, we tracked him down. This is Jake Angeli. He's easy to find online as an outspoken QAnon supporter and fan of President Trump.
Thank you, President Trump!
Now, he's posted photos of meeting Rudy Giuliani and has been photographed protesting against groups like Black Lives Matter and Antifa in the past. Wednesday night, he actually posted that, quote, I am not Antifa or BLM. I'm a QAnon and digital soldier. So claims this man is an Antifa actor in disguise are false. Now, there are more examples of people falsely being labeled Antifa and false messages. And on the other side, there are videos and evidence from people who are clearly Trump supporters, including this video of newly elected West Virginia State Rep Derek Evans. He posted this video as he was going into the Capitol, which he later deleted. Deanna Lorraine is a Republican who ran for Congress this year and lost to Nancy Pelosi. She posted this on Parler earlier saying, quote, we stormed the Capitol. We fought through tear gas and bullets and SWAT. Okay, main question. Were the people who broke into the Capitol really Antifa members? Well, at this point, there's no real evidence to back that claim. On the other hand, there were clearly other groups that aren't Antifa involved. We have tons of photos and videos of people waving Trump flags, white supremacist language, and more. We're still just hours after this happened and learning more about the intentions and motives of the people involved. At this point, though, we can say clearly that the claims that all the people who stormed the Capitol were members of Antifa are false.
Again, facts, the truth. There is no evidence whatsoever that Antifa or Black Lives Matter were involved in any way with the Insurrection Day riots in Washington, D.C. Despite the fact that people continue to say it out loud, scream it, screech it, whatever they want, there is no evidence. It goes back to the gentleman we heard from the CNN report at the beginning of the show, where he talked about the fact that when it came down to Election Day, no one had looked at all the evidence. As a matter of fact, evidence and facts are being looked at more these days and in these issues than at any time in our recent memory. You might have to go back to Watergate, but even then, that wasn't entirely factually reported either, except for a few people who got involved and decided to make it factual. These are the facts, and these are the lies being told by the Trump and being told to the Trump followers. Will it make any difference? Is going to be the question for a very long time. Let's then move to COVID-19 and once again talk about facts. The clickbait media, and many of you who follow me will know that I put everything into two categories. One is legitimate press. I don't call those of us who do this for a living media. We are the press. We are journalists. We are those who are consistently fighting for the truth and the facts no matter where it may lead us. And then there is the clickbait media. The clickbait media, people such as OAN, Newsmax, PJ Media, and others who aren't really news networks, who have never been news reporters and never been news journalists. What they are those who put out headlines to make sure that you click on them and you make the money with every single click. So let's move forward on that concept, legitimate press versus clickbait media. The clickbait media has gone out of its way in recent months to tell us that COVID-19 is raging through certain states, not because of any fault of anybody medically or Mother Nature, but because of politics. In California especially, this is being talked about, where many people will say it is because of the Democratic leadership in California that the state is now in a critical stage of the illness, where they can no longer find oxygen or beds and people are dying at record rates. Let's look at that. KCAL in Los Angeles recently looked at exactly what is happening in Southern California, and it doesn't have to do with politics. It has to do with the people themselves, who are the ones ensuring that California continues to be sick, gets much sicker, and people continue to die.
I don't know anything about the party, but it doesn't surprise me with how everything's kind of going on in this neighborhood. It's a pretty lively neighborhood.
Neighbors say this rental on Curson Avenue has had large gatherings throughout the pandemic, including as recently as last night. The city says an LAPD report was filed about the latest gathering.
When it first started happening, sometimes there were literally busloads.
Residents we talked to didn't want to be identified out of fear of retaliation.
Later, it became more subtle and the groups were smaller, but still sometimes 50 to 100 people. Sometimes there was filming involved.
This letter from the city dated September 12th is labeled the initial warning for violation of the mayor's public COVID order, and another letter written at 3:45 the next morning is labeled the final notice. But those who live in the area say the parties never stopped. LAPD's Wilshire Division confirms at least 20 calls about the home since October 27th, although it's not clear how many separate incidents those calls covered. We reached out to Councilmember Paul Koratz, who represents the district. He sent us a statement that reads in part, "The super spreader event at 849 Curson Avenue displays a complete disregard for public health and safety. As such, this evening we connected with the office of the mayor to urge an immediate LADWP water and power shutoff due to the critical escalation of recklessness at this property." We reached out to the mayor's office and they confirmed that the property is being referred to the Department of Water and Power for a utility shutoff. We also reached out to the owner of the property but haven't heard back. Hermela Argawi, KCAL 9 News.
It is again an evidence of the clickbait media and the facts, the truth here. It is not the government that is spreading COVID-19 in Southern California. Certainly, they are taking actions that some people have to be concerned about. Many of it has to do with the economy and businesses. But when it comes to the spread of COVID-19, already a deadly disease, and certainly deadly, everybody knows that by now, it's not the government doing it. It's not necessarily even Mother Nature. It is the people themselves in Southern California who are wantonly taking into effect that the rules don't apply to them, that they can have these super spreader events, and that kills people. That hurts everyone involved. And it perhaps is time for the clickbait media to take a step back and start blaming the people who are really to blame, and it is those groups and those like them. But when it comes to the government and when it comes to the facts themselves in COVID-19, we have to look across the country on the East Coast and take into effect what is happening there. Because certainly there are those who are blaming the federal government for the fact that there are not enough shots in arms these days. But there's plenty of blame to go around. Because while indeed the federal government does bear some responsibility here, we have to say that it is the local governments, the bigger cities, the governors, the cities themselves, the states, the counties, the towns, the villages. Much of the government there and much of the leadership there has been woefully ill-prepared for what has happened with COVID-19, and they don't seem to be making a lot of the right decisions to make it even better. Eva Pilgrim, reporting for ABC and Good Morning America, looks at the terrible reality on the East Coast.
This mass vaccination site is open 24/7, and even the appointments in the middle of the night are booked, as many people are discovering getting an appointment for the vaccine just isn't that simple.
This morning, frustration mounting as people across the country try to get the COVID-19 vaccine and can't. According to the CDC, more than 25 million doses of the vaccine have been distributed, but so far only about 9 million people have been vaccinated. That's nowhere near the original Operation Warp Speed prediction that 20 million people would be vaccinated by the end of December. And while more and more mass vaccination sites are opening across the country, for many, just getting an appointment is proving difficult. New York's Governor Cuomo warning appointment dates for just the first eligible group could be as far away as 14 weeks. That would be mid-April.
I've been on the computer since 8 o'clock last night and can't get an appointment anyplace.
Gloria DeJean came to this new 24-hour vaccination site in Brooklyn that is by appointment only, hoping someone could help her sign up for a slot. They gave her a piece of paper with a website.
How old are you? 81 years old.
So you just want to get a vaccine?
That's all I want. I just lost my only cousin this morning.
Alexandra Artizone has been trying to make an appointment for her 78-year-old father. He was given that same website when he came to the Brooklyn site for help.
I researched for him online, and there's no timeline, there's no guidance for them. It just basically informs them that they should sign up and then wait.
In Charlotte County, Florida, the only way to make an appointment is online. Right now, the county's Department of Health only posts available slots on Tuesdays, and they fill up fast. Liz Callahan has been trying to make an appointment for her 85-year-old mother-in-law for the last 3 weeks. So far, no success.
It said all the sites or all the slots for this week have gone. Try again next week.
And more vaccines may be coming online. Axios reporting that the White House is changing its plans, distributing all of the vaccines in its current stock instead of holding some back. And George, I did check in with that 81-year-old woman that we met out here yesterday, Gloria. She told me she went online to try to book an appointment, and all the available slots were taken.
The facts are there for us to know. Certainly, the Trump administration bears a tremendous amount of responsibility for what has happened with regard to COVID-19 in America. But it is the local government, the local individuals, the hospitals themselves who are often getting it wrong. And they are the ones who are helping to propagate what is, more or less, a killer disease across America and is costing people their lives. Something else in a factual sense that perhaps we need to look at. That lady's 81 years of age. Many people who are elderly, some even in their 50s or 60s, but many of them in their 70s, 80s, and 90s simply are not computer savvy. These are not people who many times know how to get on the internet nor how to get on the internet properly, and they get confused. There's no way to help them unless you have sons, daughters, husbands, aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, friends, someone to help them. They're lost right now, and they need help, and the local governments simply are not giving them the help that they need. So if we are going to look at the facts over what's happening in America with COVID-19, let's look at the fact of everybody involved and the number of people in power, in responsibility, who have failed miserably. That takes us then to sports and more about COVID-19. The NBA is finding out very fast that COVID-19 is running through their franchises and their teams right now as they try to start a season. They've had games that have already been canceled. As we record this show, we'll go live on this show too, as a matter of fact, the National Hockey League is preparing to open their truncated season in 2021 this evening on a Wednesday night. But they're now having problems. They're no longer in a bubble. They can't afford it anymore. They're going to lose billions of dollars without having fans in the stands. So they are forced to play in arenas again. They're forced to change things. They can't do the bubble. So guess what? There are players now and coaches who are testing positive. The mistakes are being made once again by sports. They claim they've got to get out there and they've got to make money. The fans want the games. But at what cost? Not just to the teams and the sport, but to the human beings themselves. Lindsay Dunn reports for City News in Toronto.
We believe as well, with some of the spiking that's going on in some of the places in North America, there is going to be a greater element of risk than we thought we would ultimately have.
The Leafs home opener is this Wednesday when they take on the Montreal Canadiens here at the Scotiabank Arena. No fans will be allowed at any of the games this season. However, concerns are still mounting surrounding the safety of the community and the players as multiple teams have reported issues with COVID-19.
And we're making, daily modifications, enhancements, all enhancements to the protocol to make sure they're working as well as they can be.
NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman and Deputy Commissioner Bill Daly spoke with the media on Monday to prepare for the new season that starts this Wednesday. Going into the season, the Dallas Stars have already had to push their start date back almost 2 weeks as 6 players tested positive for COVID-19 during training camp. Bettman says although he hopes it's not the case in the future, this most likely won't be the last time a game is moved around because of an outbreak.
In order for us to get through the season, we understand that there is an element of risk that COVID-19 may impact one or more games. We also understand, as we have throughout, that in order to accomplish our goal, we're going to need to be flexible and agile in how we deal with whatever we're confronted with.
The Leafs will be playing in an all-Canadian division. Compared to the end of the season last year, where the Leafs, as well as other teams in the playoffs, had to play in a bubble-like scenario in Toronto and Edmonton, they weren't allowed to leave their hotels. This season, players will be able to return to their homes after the games.
Last year, going into the bubble with Tampa, that was a little different. This is a little different, but it is nice to be home with the family and be able to use our home rink.
This time gets to the rim.
The NBA has struggled since tip-off in late December with COVID outbreaks. On Monday afternoon, the league announced the postponement of 2 games because of positive COVID-19 cases and COVID-19 tracing apps. In the afternoon, the League and Players Association met to discuss modifying the league's health and safety protocols. This weekend, the Boston Celtics-Miami Heat game was actually canceled because the Heat didn't have the league minimum of 8 players available, while the Boston Celtics had just the minimum of 8 players as both teams struggled with COVID-19 outbreaks. For City News, I'm Lindsay Dunn.
Is it worth it? Are sports worth COVID-19? The possibility that for decades, someone who catches the virus will be affected, that their lungs will be affected for the rest of their lives, and that they may pass it on to someone who could be similarly affected, or perhaps even die. It's a question that the leagues themselves and the fans are going to have to decide. However, let me just say that, for the record, being a sports fan, I do have to say I'm happy to see the National Hockey League back for a season, even though it is a short one, and I am going to look at it honestly and say that my Boston Bruins are not going to win the Stanley Cup this season. But it's nice just to have the sport back. Could I do without it? Sure. I'd rather people be safe instead of sorry. Which leads us to our final story here on this edition of the Press Corps. Something to uplift. Because finally we need something that gives us a positive. Somebody who's in there fighting. Somebody who gets the second chance. The story of a young lady, a singer in Southern California, who now can breathe easy, as she has had new life breathed into her by those who thought about life after they were gone. Kimberly Cheng at KTLA in Los Angeles has the story.
For years, 38-year-old singer Chloe Temption from Brentwood performed with a breathing tube in her nose and an oxygen tank that she was attached to 24/7. She documented her story on YouTube.
I was told that I had severe pulmonary hypertension with the probability of pulmonary veno-occlusive disease. I was told that I had little time left to live and that I would have to be on oxygen for the rest of my life.
Then things got worse. She suffered a heart attack.
I ended up in a coma for 4 days, and then I ended up on life support for 21 days.
Doctors said a high-risk double lung transplantation was her only chance at survival. Dr. Abbas Ardehali, director of the UCLA Heart and Lung Transplant Program, performed the surgery in August.
Well, she was a special individual because she was so positive and persevered despite all the challenges that this disease creates.
What an incredible man who saved my life literally in every way possible.
We could not do what we do unless a family at a time of tragedy is willing to donate their loved one's organs. And I think they are the real heroes.
Now she can breathe on her own again and sing.
I'm relearning how to sing again.
The farther I fall behind. Temption is also using her voice to spread hope and to encourage children facing medical challenges.
I have somebody else's lungs in my body, which is incredible. So there's this feeling of wanting to do justice to this person who, you know, is the reason that I'm alive right now. And there's this like tragic element, but there's this miraculous element. And then there's this fear, of course, because you don't know what's going to happen. But there's this extreme joy. And I'm so grateful to be alive. There is hope. You know, there really is hope.
Dr. Ardehali says no matter how dire a situation may seem, patients should continue to seek care because new advances in treatment could emerge. Live in Westwood, Kimberly Cheng, KTLA 5 News.
At a difficult time in America, it is nice to see that we finally have some good news. It's out there. There's good news and there's good stories. We just have to find it. And that's what we're here to do. A reminder once again that the Press Corps is here to look at real news, real reporters, and bring you the stories based on facts. And every now and then, we'll manage to knock down those who are not using the facts. And that's what I will use in my commentary as well. Don't forget to join us on YouTube, join us on Facebook, and also on Twitter. You can check out anytime. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The show is always seen live and then recorded at Berliner Speaks. As it notes as well, you can go to the YouTube page, the Press Corps, realnews.com. You can find us there. On audio podcast, make sure that you check us out there under The Man in the Arena, because it's all there with the various shows that I produce and that we are all a part of here in at least trying to push forward some real, factual news. Thanks for joining us, everybody. I'm Ed Berliner. Until we meet again, rock on, true believers. See ya! Stay in touch with the Press Corps on social media, at Berliner Speaks, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And a reminder, all live shows debut on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. Speaking of YouTube, every episode is available at thepresscorpsrealnews.com. And all live shows debut on edberlinerlive.com. Talk business. Join me on LinkedIn by searching out Ed Berliner. And when it comes to podcasts, the Press Corps is available on every major audio podcast platform, including iTunes, iHeart Podcast, Spotify, and TuneIn Radio. The Press Corps is a copyrighted production of Entourage Management, LLC, and Entourage Media. It may not be used in any form without the expressed written permission of these entities and/or their legal representatives.